Going live. You're live. Well, I hope so. Otherwise, this afterlife is a grave disappointment. Grave. All right. Sorry. Oh, I'm tired. I'm not feeling well. But day one of creating a board game. So here's where we hit the ground running. I basically knew this was coming. I went back and forth about whether or not I was going to come up with the premise before day one, and I'm like, that's not the point. The point is to start from the very first day. You come up with the idea, and you share the process of coming up with the idea, and then you gradually spell out what you need to do, and then hopefully by the end of the project, with the daily updates, you have a finished product that you can point people to. Not only so that they can see the creation of the game and then get the game, but also see like how they might be able to do the same thing. So this is going into the archives. Nobody ever seems to show up for my live streams. Probably would be useful if I actually let people know I was doing them. But there's an aspect of this where I am not a live communicator with large groups, so I kind of might be sabotaging myself on the success of my live streams, at least till I get more comfortable and familiar with it. But I can do better. It wouldn't hurt me to do that. And I may try to do announcements of these coming up beforehand. I have to get over my anxiety and discomfort with that before I do that. And I don't know why I have headphones on. I'm not watching the video anymore. Yeah, we did Views Day. It's Tuesday here, and I did 6 to about 10 after 8. No, 10 after. No, it wasn't. Anyway, I did about 2 hours and 10 minutes of a movie, Thor: The Dark World, today. I've got 2 more videos to shoot and edit tonight, and edit another 3rd video tonight if I can for my various projects. And it's a boatload of stuff to do right now, but right now we're going to be coming up with a board game idea, and I'm going back and forth. I want to do a sort of a silly, simple, a cheesy board game, almost like Chutes and Ladders or something like that. That's a very straightforward kind of simple, straightforward game that you could create something like that. But it sort of feels like cheating. And I was going through a book I have on traditional board games, where chess, checkers, backgammon, Parcheesi. There are different versions of that, and I'm not making this up. I've seen it spelled as Pachisi and Parcheesi. I think there are a couple other ways to refer to that, and I have a couple of those 12 games in one, where you turn the handle and it cranks a scroll past over a piece of steel, and you have little magnetic pieces that click onto it, so you can play on the scroll. And there's some variants, generic variants of games in there. And the book that I have that has a bunch of games has the Nine Men Morris or whatever it is, and Go. But it also has some games I've never heard of or seen anywhere else. Like I think one is called Hex or something. It was something supposedly invented by mathematicians on a hexagonal tiled bathroom floor at some point, which I can only imagine was more along the lines of the mathematics interns at a university were hungover and they were on the floor, but the tiles, yeah, anyway. And a lot of those games, the backgammon, um, backgammon and Parcheesi, um, they're easy enough to do like themed variants on. If you just make a board with like changing the look of the paths, um, do Celtic knotwork instead of straight lines, like stuff like that. You can really theme it up in a way that like hides its origins, but uses the mechanics and the structure of the board play. And you can also do things like if it's a game that you can play in like 10 to 20 minutes, you can extend the routes traveled or add a complicating factor that can extend gameplay longer. And some of that's not a bad way to go. Um, and like, so I kind of think I'll look at some of those things, but I want it to be sort of like a self-contained game with a story element to it, and not a like a reskin essentially. I don't want it to be an existing simple game like backgammon where you change the spikes out for uh, arches and you change out the discs for um, meeple. Like I don't I don't want it to be like some just like gimmicky reskin. Anybody can do that. And it might not be. God, my ear is still driving me nuts. This ear infection is not fun. All right. Anybody can do those kinds of things, and like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. If you do some really nice artwork and you build a variant of a backgammon game that's a circle with arches on it on the inside and the outside. Um, I mean, that's a viable way to do a simple art reskin of a game that can pitch the game to somebody who's never played it before and make them feel like they're playing a new, unique game. It's doable. You can even theme it with like some story element at the beginning and the end where you tell them like you are an epic hero ready to battle monsters and uh, or battle the opposing forces in a war for the saving the world. And like the center of the board would be a planet, and um, it would be like, or maybe you do the center of the board as an island map, and you're defending your island from invaders from the outside. Like there are ways to do that. And if you really wanted to, it's been a long time since I played backgammon. I feel like if you made certain pieces capable of moving, not moving, I think having an effect feature happen in the game, it would change it a little bit, but like you might have to make a rule to change the movement or the effect of one piece against others, and then have a counter rule that affects the like it rebalances the mechanics. But yeah, you could do that. That's sort of not what I want to do. I'm a lover of a good story premise pitch, and like there is no story premise pitch for like a backgammon. Like you can come up with a story or a premise or a plot write those parts out, and then borrow mechanics from games to make them happen. And I might do something a little more like that. Um, so, like one of the most common things you get in a game is a path you travel to. Now, there's start to end kind of journeys where you get start at the beginning and you end at the end, and then there's loop tracks where you recirculate over and over again through a territory, trying to meet certain qualifiers, either to escape the loop. So you could do something like a reincarnation. Every time you pass a certain point, you start a new life, um, but you hold on to golden principles that you've acquired on your journey in the hopes of escaping the wheel of eternity to nirvana. You could do something totally like that. And the way you acquire those golden lessons or golden principles might be like trivia, or like a, maybe not like a trivia, but like a test example. Like, you encounter such and such and they do this and that, and what is the response to best handle this circumstance, and achieving some kind of awareness of the lessons. Yeah, you can do that. I'm not looking to do that story. It's a possibility that at some point I could do something like that. That seems to me more like a lesson disguised as a game rather than a game with story elements. And uh, there's a tricky aspect of like math and mechanics in games, that it's very easy to unbalance gameplay in a way that's semi-destructive, and means that, like, when played, like, you may be preserving the story aspect of it, or your game looks good in principle, but when you're actually playing it, there's some mechanic that's just really broken. And I mean, my first game I came up with didn't really have that issue. We did some play testing of some of it for Runcible Foods, and for the most part, it was pretty good out the gate. The biggest issue we had was um, how many cards each player got, and like how many you got to start with, whether or not you always had to have that number of cards in your hand, and um, just sort of like as you cycle through the deck, how do you handle, like, it can handle about 5 players with the base deck before you have to start to recycle it at the end of the turns. Um, and uh, some of it turned out to make more sense to do it's not a set number of cards. You all start with the same number of cards, and the mechanic for shifting over the cards in your hand regularly enough to be useful in gameplay. Like, if you had the same 3 cards every hand, 3 to 5 cards every hand, and you just had to keep playing those cards in a way, it's it's an unplayable game. But having a way to cycle those cards out where you use them as like a bid, and then um, you lose them at the end of that bid to whoever wins. So you might get them back as part of a win, but they become like a trophy set. You don't use them in play anymore. And then you draw more to bring your cards back up to a handful, based off of a set value, rather than, like, you start with 3. If you bid 1 card and somebody else bids 2, how do you resolve the fact that, like, at the end of that turn, if everybody just draws one card, you're down a card. And we sort of came up with a mechanic that works better for that. And I might do a demo or a preview or show off. I'm reworking the artwork for Runcible cards. Taking some courses online about some photography and artwork, so I can illustrate and rework the artwork for my cards. Because right now it's really just a few simple images. Snagged, I think, honestly, if I remember correctly, a good portion of those were snagged still images from a stock image site. And that's all well and good. But I can do the art better than that. And I kind of want to make the artwork for it myself. Now, this game that I'm working on now, yet to be named and yet to be fully fleshed out, I might go artwork light. It depends. It depends on really how much I'm able to achieve in a given amount of time. I'll look at like some concept artwork designs I'll play with. My instinct right now is I'm a fan of multiple different things. I'd love to do steampunk. I'd love to do cyberpunk, superheroes, fantasy. I love clockwork, and you could do pirates or air pirates, or um, you could do mythological monsters as heroes. I mean, that's all dressing, that's costuming for this game. And I think the first thing I need to think about is, what type of game is it? Is it a race game? Is it a fight the other players kind of game? Is it cooperative? I actually do really like to do cooperative games if I can. I like the mechanic in a cooperative game because there are people I would play games with, but they don't play games because it gets too competitive. And there are some people I know who have uh, like learning disabilities or had head injuries, and their ability to focus um, means that they're usually at a disadvantage in certain gaming type mechanics that pit people against each other. And I would much rather have them have fun playing a game with me. Um, if that means designing a game where those people and I can play a game together and we win together against the game. I like that idea a lot, but and then there's like parents wanting to play a game with young children who maybe aren't up to competing on that level. Um, that's a possibility. It's harder to design a game like that because there's not a lot of them out there with which to use as examples to understand the way to engineer a game like that. There are some of them out there. I'd have to take a look at some of those, and I think that's something that will require more research and time for me to develop. Because I want to make that a really good, well thought out game that I can play with all sorts of people at all different times. And this challenge is more about seeing if I can come up with an idea for a game and create it in a short period of time, and then sell it through some means that's available to me. Now, when I was first thinking about this challenge, there's something else I'll be doing later at a different point for a different part of this sort of thing, where like a different challenge where I'd be doing uh, a video of some kind, and there's something I can do game-wise as a piece that can be included in the theme of that video, so I can tie them together. Um, and so part of that idea was there's a part of that idea where a recurring theme is doing something stupid. Eat a stupid sandwich, take a stupid shower, and it's like, so you're wearing a tutu and a top hat, with a wetsuit in the shower with a snorkel and goggles. I mean, that's a stupid shower. That's not how showers work. Eat a stupid sandwich. You make a sandwich in a way that makes no sense, and that's fun. And then at some point, it would be fun to do like play a stupid game with friends and actually create a game called the stupid game. Now, what the mechanics of that stupid game would be, I don't know. And why it's called a stupid game, I don't know. And like it would be fun to just try to make a stupid game. And like I'm thinking, like if I did that, it would probably be like I feel like it's got to be with goofy props. So I did a review a while back of Arch Rival, which is a party game that has this arch of cups that you can drop things into, and like you have to roll how many you put in at a certain color cup and whether or not that compromises the structure. Every time I've played that game, even with people who have been drinking or are high, we used up all the pieces and got them into the car compartments, and pieces didn't fall. So I must have a lot of really steady-handed friends, but we had to invent house mechanics to just keep pushing it to the edge where everything fell. And you could do something like that kind of game for like a party game with dexterity or tricks or something like that to make a stupid game. But I feel like there might be something a little bit more like I've not played it. I've heard some people who have played games like I think they're like Flux and Munchkin that have like a section of absurdity. Like absurdity is a huge part of the theme of the game. And if I took some of the mechanics of a game where the rules change in the middle of gameplay based off of what's played, it sort of becomes like a game of Calvin Ball. I don't know if you've ever read Calvin and Hobbes, where they have the Calvin Ball game where Calvin adds a new rule every time he wants to be the one who's winning. You could do something like that as a mechanic for a stupid game. But I don't feel like I have a strong enough grasp of a direction or a way to achieve that. And I'm not familiar enough with games that are like that to be able to pull something together that'll be reasonably functional. I feel like I would have to spend a day or two, maybe even 3, testing out a couple of games like that. Then build my game inspired by them, tweaking the mechanics in ways that fit the direction I want to go with what I'm doing. And then I'd have to do 3 or 4 days of playtesting after that. And that's easily 3 or 4 weeks of just research and playtesting. before I get to the artwork and design phase. And then the publishing aspect of that game shouldn't take more than a day or so, I don't think. So I think that's a slightly more cumbersome way to make a game. And I think some of the easiest games that I could pursue right now are going to be not quite race games, but like the gathering kind of games where you, not Magic the Gathering, but like gathering games where you gather certain things. Like Trivial Pursuit is sort of like that, where you land on spaces of a certain color and are confronted with a challenge. And the challenge, depending on how you perform, can award you an item you need to move towards the center of victory. So, like in Trivial Pursuit, if I remember, it's been a long time. I think the last time I played Trivial Pursuit was about 8 or 9 years ago, and it was my sister's a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I got her a Lord of the Rings Trivial Pursuit, and we were playing that, and I think we were about an hour and a half in, where half of our play group quit, but she and I just kept going and going, and we made it through the whole deck of cards. Just to be clear, like towards the end of the game, it was just she and I playing against each other. Nobody else had gotten very far else on the game, and we were recycling cards, and we could remember towards the start of the game. Oh yeah, I remember that question. The answer is this. So yeah, we hit that game pretty hard, but that can run a really long time. But as you go around the track, there are different colors of wedges that you put on your token piece to qualify to leave the base track and move up towards the center. I believe that's how that game works. Like I said, it's been a while. And so, like, gathering those tokens, those wedges, is sort of like the mechanic I'm thinking of. Now, you can make the gathering things like playing cards that you can. Every person has to go around the track until they get all 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, spirit, and save Captain Planet's. I won't be doing any like fan games of existing properties that I don't have the rights to. So I won't be doing that. But maybe do like an alchemist trying to gather the 3 elements of alchemy, where you get the salt, sulfur, and mercury. And each one of those might be a different tier on the track. And like if you really wanted to make the game long and difficult, you could do the earth, water, air, and fire of salt, sulfur, and mercury. So each one of 3 categories should have 4 categories of resources you have to accumulate, and then make your homunculi or your philosopher's stone or whatever. So you could do something like that, and that's the mechanic of a board game. That's a track that you travel around with until you get all the resources you need to get to the next level. So, like, your first level might be your salt level, and so you have to try to get the earth, water, air, fire on earth level to ascend to water level, and get 4 resources on that level, ascend to air, or to no, mercury level, and gather your last resources there, and then do the great work of either creating life or creating the philosopher's stone or whatever you want to do with that. Turn lead to gold, become immortal, create life. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. That feels like that would be a super long game, I have the knowledge of the information from research I did when I was much younger into those topics. So it's possible to do that, and I might do that at some point. I think that's longer than I want to make right now, and to make it a streamlined enough game, like what's the mechanic by which the challenges you overcome award you those items? Because you have to, at that point, you have to accumulate 12, 4 times 3. Um, that's like twice as many wedges as Trivial Pursuit. And like I said, the Lord of the Rings Trivial Pursuit I played with my sister, we played that for over 3 hours to get the 6 wedges or 4 wedges. I don't even remember if it had a full 6 wedges for Lord of the Rings. Um, just to get off that base track and get towards the center. I was like doubling or tripling the number of wedges you have to acquire to get off of that board game. Runtime could be astronomical. And I don't know that I want to do it that way. And I think like just the circle track to get up to a next level, I'd want to theme it in a way that's a little more fun. So with some of that in my mind, there's an aspect of like that. It's also like Monopoly, where it's just a big loop that you go around and around and around trying to accumulate properties or whatever. And when people land on your property, you can penalize them. That's one possibility. I don't want to do a Monopoly game. I have bad memories of Monopoly. I kind of hate that game. I'll have to give it another try at some point and just see if it's like when I was younger, I hated certain foods and now I find them palatable. Um, so maybe Monopoly is a game I would enjoy now. Just reluctant to build one like it. But doing a closed loop that you cycle through rather than a race game that you go from start to end, I think that's the way I want to go with. And then acquiring, like, I don't want it to be like get a ruby and emerald, a sapphire, a diamond, gold and silver, or something like that. But like just using that as a point of reference, like say you have 5 or 6 items, and maybe it's possible to build a game where like the base game starts with you get 4 or 5 items to accumulate towards the win scenario in the game. So you're competing against other players. So this the acquisition style games usually tend to be competitive. I don't know how I would make that cooperative. But what I'm thinking of here is building a base game where the base game play is a competitive acquisition game. You acquire a piece from each of 4 to 6 categories. And once you've met those qualifying needs, um, cash them in for victory scenario at a finishing line or whatever. That's relatively easy to do. And um, the question is like when you go to each location, how do you, like, what's the challenge to acquiring those things? Or do you just automatically get them if you go to point C? Do you automatically get card C that you then can use towards your winning scenario? Um, I'll have to think about how that mechanic will work. But the circular track that you loop around and sort of like a penalty, um, like have it possible to either befall bad circumstances or an opponent cause bad circumstances for you and get sort of put in jail, and you need to get your way out. Now, it's possible to do like a, keep drawing cards until you get a get out of jail free card, or wait till somebody passes go to escape. Like once everybody else has passed go once, you let go. Um, that's possible. I'll have to think about how that mechanic works, but I like the idea of a circular track, not necessarily a circle, but a closed track that you're operating on with stops to acquire parts of things you need to win for the win quality of the game, the win scenario, and a way to get booted off the track and have to find a way to get back on. Maybe a separate track on a different area. You could almost do a situation where, like, there's the game is sort of an opponent on the main track, and say, like, if you're a robber and your job is to, do a heist at a bank, an art museum, or a art show, an art gallery, and a history museum with artifacts, and I don't know, something else, a jewelry store. And you need to get one piece from each to prove yourself to a thieves guild or something like that. If during that point it's possible for one of your opponents to either tip off the police and get you caught, or you hit a unlucky spot or a bad roll that ends up getting you caught by police. You end up on an outside track where if you perform a sting for the police at some point where it looks like you can earn your way off the bad track or testify or agree to um, witness protection to get out, and like there has to be a penalty paid to do that kind of thing, like, or a challenge that you have to achieve to get out of the situation that you got into. Like that kind of mechanic might be kind of fun to throw in there. So acquiring 4 to 6 items, the risk of getting pulled off the track and having to earn your way back onto it. The ability to maybe sabotage other players through some sort of gameplay mechanic, like specialty cards that you lay out. And acquiring your 4 to 6 items gets you out. I kind of think it would be fun to have like stations that aren't like a jewelry store where, like, once I've hit it, well, maybe, like, I want it to be something like I get it and I claim it. Like, you can't claim a whole store. It doesn't disappear once you've robbed it. And a new store opens up there for somebody else to get. And it's randomly selected what that store does. So, like, you could have 4 stores and you have to get 6 different items. And the 4 stores you have clearly won't have each one of each item type. And when somebody hits one of those stores, you might pull that one off and a different item type goes up, or another one of the same type. So replacing them with like randomly drawn stores, that's kind of an interesting idea. And it makes it possible that at a later date, I could do expansion packs. So, like, if you wanted to play a longer version of the game with a larger group of people, um, you throw in more stores. And instead of trying to acquire 4 items, you try to acquire 8. And it's 8 different types. So I should probably think about making a mechanic where your goal is to get 4, 5, or 6 items of different types, but have 8 to 10 different types you can get. So I'll have to think about that. Crunch some of the mechanics for how I can make that happen and what makes it like, do you buy them? Like having a currency that you have to save up in order to get certain resources is a viable way of doing that. Do I also use the currency as like you're able to move a greater distance, but in order to do that, it costs you more money? And at which point, like, you could move slower and save more so you have more to buy a resource at the end of one leg of your journey, or you could move faster at the risk of potentially not having enough to buy what you need when you get there. That's it's an interesting idea. I think mechanic wise, it adds a like a mathematical like there should be a reasonable middle point where like you don't either go too fast and spend too much or go too slow but save a lot. Um, there has to be like a comfortable 3 little spots in the middle where like being just right gets you around at an even pace. So there's a reward for going faster because you can beat those middle ground people, but there's a risk to it. And there's a reward for going slower and having the resources you need. But you could win if everybody played middle ground all the time or switched enough back and forth to be able to benefit from that. But the math of making out like what are those like middle ground qualities that you have to find and where is the point where like you break the mechanics so that clearly going as fast as possible. Like if you go around each time and you pass go and get $300, but your resources cost usually somewhere between 40 and $70. You one pass around uh, the second time you go through, you're going to have enough to get most of everything you need. So you have to do the calculations as to what makes the most sense in that. So I got to think about that a little bit. Um, like whether or not motion is like a die roll, a managed resource, and whether or not it's a resource that taps into your reserves that you can't use if you spend it all to move. It's possible that I can build a simple enough mechanic and later if I do the expansion packs of stores um, that I could do like a rules variant edition with the pack. So there are a couple ways that like, I think I do want to kind of try to make a expansion pack rules variant, or this will be volume 1, and next time around, like I can release a like this could be beta version, and the next one can be version 1.2 or whatever. Um, it's possible. If I'm gonna do it based off of a computer theme, like a version 2.0, or anybody remember Windows 3.11? Those DOS prompts were a nightmare. I hated those. Like if you didn't know the name of the path to get to your file, like I don't like any operating system that requires you to, this is just a random tangent. I will never use an operating system that requires you to keep a notebook of the paths you have to travel to get to your file that you created. I mean, it's taking up space on my hard drive. Why why can't I find it? It's like a filing cabinet that's locked and you can't get into. Like you can't tell if there are files in that drawer. That's a stupid way to do it. Actually, it might be fun to do something computer based. Not computer based, but like computer coding would be boring as all get out. But I think I mentioned earlier, I kind of do like cyberpunk. So might be fun to do a cyberpunk themed gathering or like acquisition. Maybe not like acquisition, but like you have to compromise certain targets. So you have to sort of like tag them, make them yours, hack them, get into them, install a Trojan horse or whatever. Um, yeah, that's not bad. And it goes along with that robbery theme where you can uh, you can tip off the police to your opponents with a certain card, like a snitch card or an informant card. And they'll tip the cops off, and the cops can pinch your opponent, and they have to either hack their way out or something. It's not bad. And you don't so much acquire like jewelry or a piece of artwork or something like that, so much as you own the systems of big name people or blackmail material, something like that. I'll have to figure out whether or not I'm going to use a resource management method of moving on the board, or if I'm going to do like a die roll. I don't like a die roll so much. Like putting it all up to chance. If you're a crappy roller, well, there are possible ways to manage that. Where if you're a certain type of like a street samurai or a hacker or a corpsec, uh, it lends you an advantage. So like you have the possibility of like rolling two dice and uh, you can spend a point to reroll one. That's a possibility. I could do something like that maybe. I will think about that, but I'm liking this more and more. Like the circular route, um, like a jail, cyberpunk theme, uh, gathering targets, I guess. Um, and movement strategies. And I could do some like digital artwork for it. Yeah, I think this is the way I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do a cyberpunk themed, resource gathering. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. Oh, wow, we're at 50 minutes. I didn't realize this brainstorm session was going to run 50 minutes. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Like, I'm used to doing them about 35 minutes. And, like, for a first one, for this topic, I kind of like, I let it run its full length. As I get further into it, where there's, like, here's the artwork I did for it. I could be done that in 10, like, I'll probably do some of the work not live, but it might be nice to do some of the work on pieces live. But as it comes down to just hashing out the specifics, I might have shorter videos as there's not a lot to cover always. But yeah, I'm going to do some research now. I'm going to sort of build a template of like the rules page for the game and figure out like the way I want to do this. Maybe some rules variants. Like, should I do like two different modes, like a cooperative maybe? Cooperative hacker game. Might be kind of weird. It's usually very dystopian with a fair amount of betrayal. Ooh. Like each player maybe has a motivation. Like there are games out there where like each player has a private motivation and a group motivation. And sometimes it benefits the player to sabotage other players to win. Like you could cooperate, but you get bonus points for betraying other players. Like, ooh. If I don't do it in the first version of this game, maybe making rule variants that allow that to like make the rules robust enough that at a later date I can add those into the game as rule variants. That could be fun. This could be a very interesting game. I like this. This is gonna be fun. Alrighty, well, it's 50, yeah, we're about 53 minutes in here to the hour. And like nobody's commenting on here, so I don't know if people are able to enter to view as I run this live. I'm not good enough at this yet. But if there were more people here talking, like I could probably interact more on that level with this kind of thing. So we could run stuff like this longer. Like I feel like this might be the one that works best for this live stream channel stuff. I can see doing this pretty regularly. Make a board game or make a card game on this channel. Like just get a deck of index cards, make a card game. I've got a couple of old, like you can go to the thrift store and get like so many copies of like Parcheesi or Trouble or Sorry or even Monopoly, and like use stickers or decoupage techniques. Just peel the surface off of the boards and put your own surfaces on them. Use the game pieces for your own means. Use the dice. And get some index cards to make your own cards for the game. And boom, you're out the door with a game that you can play with friends, play test at groups. There's got to be a playtest group somewhere in your area. It can't be, well, maybe not. I don't know how common they are. Like I was lucky enough that we had one at a local gaming store, and when that gaming store closed, I know a place where I can meet with other people. So I took up the responsibility of running those playtest and game design groups. So maybe it doesn't happen a lot in areas where you are. You can start one. And let me tell you, if you're a member of a makerspace, look, and if you're not, look into it. They have 3D printers where you can print your own characters and pieces. You could probably do this at your local library too. Many libraries are trying to build mini maker spaces in them. So like laser cutters, 3D printers, and a quiet place to meet up with other people. You might be able to get an area where you can play board games. Talk to your local librarian, see if that's an option. And you can probably, like the libraries and universities, some universities are trying to start maker spaces too. So if you're a student, that's a possibility, or even a teacher, you can do that kind of stuff too. So there are a lot of potential opportunities, and I think that like your gaming stores are a possibility. You can do game nights where people play together. They don't usually have them make manufacturing pieces and board games and stuff, but like I said, just hit a thrift store and get like a $2 board game that you can reskin to make your board on. Use regular pawns that come in a lot of those games for your playing pieces, your dice. Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities out there to do some of this stuff. I have a copy, I think, of Sorry, I think, and I may stick down a play testable bit of printout sticker or something on it for the board. Use the pawns that come with it. Maybe the dice. I don't know. It might have dice. I don't know if it has a spinner or dice or whatever. Like, if it has one, I can use either of those kinds of things. A spinner might be kind of weird for a cyberpunk game. There might be another way to do it. I don't want to do anything that requires batteries because, like, instinctively, my brain says you could do something with like a digital dice, but I don't want to do anything that requires batteries. So I might hash out the rules, maybe slap together a rough outline of a board, get some index cards and rough out some ideas. I don't know how much I'll have done by tomorrow night, but it should be interesting. I will see you tomorrow night, I guess. And I can't wait to tell you what I've gotten done on this project by then. All right, take care of yourselves.